I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even confront her. I simply waited. For months, I kissed her goodnight, packed her lunch, smiled at her family gatherings, and even massaged her feet after a long day, all while knowing she was sleeping with someone else. It wasn't a moment of weakness that broke me. It was the consistency of her lies. And when the time was right, I walked away clean, cold, and calculated. No drama, no fight, no second chances. She lost everything. And I found peace. This isn't a story about revenge. This is a story about clarity. About what happens when you stop arguing with lies and start building your freedom in silence. About how some betrayals don't need to be shouted, and they just need to be witnessed in quiet detail until the right moment arrives. So if you're here for fireworks, you won't find them. But if you've ever suffered in silence, ever swallowed your pain because love demanded it, then this story might feel like coming home. Because sometimes the loudest kind of justice is silence. We were the picture of stability, or at least that's what everyone thought. Married young, built a home together, hosted dinner parties on Saturdays, laughed with friends who joked about how perfect we looked. We were the couple people pointed to and said, "That's what I want one day." And honestly, I thought we were solid too. She was beautiful in a calm, grounded way, not flashy, not dramatic. The kind of woman who made coffee for us every morning and folded my socks just the way I liked. I loved her for that simplicity, for the quiet routines we built. We had matching towels, weekend rituals, a Spotify playlist titled Ours, and a shared dream of buying a cabin upstate. We even named our hypothetical kids. It was all very scripted. And maybe that was the problem. We became a performance. Memorized lines, mechanical touches, conversations that stayed at the surface. Looking back, I realize I knew something was off far earlier than I admitted. There were gaps in her stories. Her smile didn't always reach her eyes. She started going out more with the girls and laughing at her phone just a little too often. But denial was a powerful drug. I clung to our routines like they were evidence. As long as she still made my coffee, surely everything was okay, right? I ignored the whispers in my gut, the flickers of suspicion, because acknowledging them would mean acknowledging the collapse of something I had invested years into. So I doubled down. I brought her flowers, planned date nights, started learning how to cook her favorite meals. Maybe if I loved harder, she'd find her way back. But love isn't a leash, and loyalty doesn't work like gravity. You can give someone the world, but if their heart isn't in it anymore, they'll still drift. And she drifted. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. Asterisk, asterisk, and then came the dagger to my already bleeding chest. The man she was cheating with was the husband of her best friend. Asterisk, 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 yes, the same man who had laughed with me at parties, who sat across from us at dinner tables, who once toasted to our perfect marriages. It wasn't just betrayal, it was war declared by those I had welcomed into my trust. That night, my heartbreak matured into ice-cold clarity. The truth came in fragments. A text left open on her phone. A name I didn't recognize, but that appeared more often than coincidence would allow. Receipts that didn't match the timeline she gave me. Small inconsistencies that added up to one undeniable reality. She was cheating. But instead of confronting her, I froze. There was no shouting match. No late-night accusations. No begging for answers or explanations. Just silence. My silence. I didn't tell her I knew. I didn't tell anyone. I carried it alone for days, then weeks, then months. Every morning, I kissed her forehead goodbye like everything was fine. Every evening, I asked how her day was. She smiled, lied, I nodded. Inside, I was burning, but outside, I was ice. It was a strange kind of power to know the truth and say nothing, to be in the presence of deception and wear the mask of oblivion. She thought she was getting away with it. She thought she was clever. That was her mistake. I used those months to build a quiet war room. I made copies of everything: the texts, the call logs, the credit card receipts. I spoke with a lawyer. I created a new bank account. I slowly moved money. I found an apartment. She never noticed. She was too busy living her double life, too sure I was still the clueless husband. But I wasn't clueless. I was patient. She had no idea that every time she lied to my face, I was mentally noting the detail, the inflection, the tell. I cataloged everything, not for revenge, but for liberation. Because the moment I discovered her betrayal, I stopped loving her. Not out of hatred, not even sadness, just ... clarity. The woman I loved didn't exist. She was an illusion I had clung to. And once the veil was lifted, there was only calculation. I watched her carefully during those months, studied her like a case file, how she made excuses to leave the house, how she avoided eye contact when I asked about her day, how her phone never left her hand. And I thought, how many lies can a person tell before they forget the truth? She was drowning in her own narrative, and I was building my exit with quiet precision. I didn't want her to hurt like I hurt. I wanted her to realize I had known all along, and that she was never one step ahead. She was already losing everything, she just didn't know it yet. Living with someone who doesn't know you know, that's a performance few people can maintain. But I did. Each morning, I brewed her coffee the way she liked it, toasted her favorite bread, asked about her dreams from the night before, pretending I still cared about the answer. I smiled at her mother when she called, told her everything was fine. It was exhausting, but it was also strangely empowering. I had always been the one who wore his heart on his sleeve. But now, I wore a mask so perfect, even I started believing it. I didn't flinch when she hugged me, didn't pull away when she kissed me. I matched every lie with an act of devotion. She never suspected. If anything, she grew more relaxed. Her lies became sloppier, the secrecy lazier. She'd forget to lock her phone, leave receipts on the counter, text during dinner. The more careless she became, the more control I felt. And in that strange, reversed world, I found something terrifying. I wasn't hurting anymore. I wasn't waiting for her to confess or apologize. I was documenting, preparing, curating her downfall like an artist with a masterpiece in progress. Some nights, I'd lie in bed beside her and wonder if she ever looked at me and felt guilt. If her heart ever raced at the thought, I might know. But if she did, she was a better actress than I gave her credit for. We took selfies, hosted friends, made plans for holidays. Everyone still thought we were perfect. I remember one night in particular. We were at a friend's engagement party. Champagne, fairy lights, love in the air. She wore a red dress. I watched her laugh with a man across the room, someone I didn't recognize. Her hand touched his forearm just a little too long. That night, as we got home, I helped her out of her heels. She smiled, said, "Thank you for being such a good husband." I nodded and saved the footage from the party on a hidden drive. That's the thing about pretending. You become hyper-aware. Every gesture, every word, every deviation becomes data. And with each piece, I strengthened my case not for court, but for clarity. I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom with facts. There's a cold discipline in pretending. It teaches you patience, precision, and detachment. It burns at first, but then it hardens you. By the time I reached the end of that phase, I was no longer her husband emotionally. I was a strategist, a quiet observer living behind a curtain, waiting for the final cue. She thought she was the one dancing between two lives. But the truth was, she had become a character in mine, and the climax was coming. Soon. Asterisk, asterisk, I ordered a secret DNA test. Something felt wrong off. The timeline, the features, the growing doubts in my chest. Asterisk, asterisk. And when the results came in, it tore my soul apart. The boy I had raised, kissed goodnight, protected with my life, was not biologically mine. Asterisk, asterisk, it wasn't just the affair that destroyed me. It was the lie I rocked to sleep every night. Asterisk, asterisk. The day I left didn't start with a bang. It started with coffee. Like every other day, I got up early, made her toast, poured her oat milk, packed her lunch. I even ironed her blouse. It was routine, polished by repetition. She yawned and smiled. "You're too good to me." I smiled back. That morning, she told me she'd be out late, girls' night again. I nodded. "Have fun," I said. And then I watched her walk out the door, like it was just another day. It wasn't. I waited 5 minutes. Then I stood up, went to the safe, pulled out the folder, printed emails, bank statements, photos, screen captures. I placed them neatly on the dining table, exactly where she'd see them the moment she got back. On top, a single envelope. Inside, the signed divorce papers. Next to it, a single note. I knew, for months, and I waited not for you, but for me. Goodbye. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I walked out with just a suitcase, my documents, and a laptop I'd bought after creating a new life behind her back. I didn't look back. It felt like stepping out of a skin I had outgrown. I moved into the apartment I'd leased months earlier. The refrigerator was already stocked, the curtains already hung, my clothes already in the closet. It was like arriving home, only this time, the peace was real. That evening, my phone lit up. 7 missed calls, 12 texts, all from her. "Where are you? Why is there a folder on the table? I don't understand, please call me." Then the anger. "You planned this? You coward. Come home and explain yourself." But there was nothing to explain. I had already done the math. I had filed the paperwork, closed the joint accounts, reclaimed my name. By the time she realized the extent of my silence, it was too late. The beauty of my exit wasn't in its cruelty. It was in its precision. No drama, no shouting, no scandal. Just facts, just truth. Just the quiet justice of a man who saw everything and said nothing until it mattered most. She showed up at my new place once, cried in the hallway, begged, said she didn't know why she did what she did, that she missed me, that it was a mistake. I stood in the doorway and let her speak. When she was done, I said, "I hope you find what you're looking for, but it's not here." Then I closed the door and locked it. I never saw her again. The funny thing about silence is that people confuse it with weakness. But silence, when chosen, is power. I didn't stay silent because I couldn't scream. I stayed silent because I was done talking to someone who had already stopped listening. In the end, she didn't just lose a husband. She lost access. She lost the version of me that loved her. And that was the most devastating consequence of all. The first night alone in my new apartment was silent, so silent. It hurt. Not the silence itself, but what it revealed. There were no footsteps in the hallway, no perfume lingering on the pillow, no shared laughter bouncing off the walls. Just me and the echo of my own breathing. And in that quiet, I met myself again. At first, I didn't know what to do with the space. I kept expecting the buzz of her texts, the clatter of keys at the door, the hum of routine. But as each hour passed without those things, something strange began to happen. I didn't miss her. I missed who I thought she was. That realization was liberating and shattering all at once. I wasn't grieving a person, I was grieving a fantasy. I spent the first few weeks building habits from scratch. Cooking for one, reading late into the night, sitting with uncomfortable emotions instead of running from them. I cried sometimes without warning. I laughed too, often at memories that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. Therapy helped a lot, not because it gave me answers, but because it gave me mirrors. My therapist asked questions I had avoided for years. Why had I ignored the signs? Why did I stay silent so long? Why did I feel more guilty than she did? Healing didn't come in waves. It came in fragments, small, sharp moments that cut through the numbness. Like the time I passed our old favorite restaurant and didn't feel the urge to stop. Or the moment I deleted our shared Spotify playlist without hesitation. Grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet untying of knots you didn't realize had been choking you. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. Page after page, I wrote letters I never intended to send. Letters to her, to myself, to the version of me that once begged for love through silence. I forgave that version because he did the best he could with what he knew. And when he knew better, he walked. That was the turning point. Realizing that leaving wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. It was an act of radical self-respect. I began reconnecting with friends I had neglected, took solo hikes, traveled, watched bad movies, and cooked complicated meals just to prove I could. I reclaimed my name, my time, my rhythm. And slowly, something in me softened. The bitterness faded. The obsession with closure dissolved. I stopped needing her to understand what she lost, because I finally understood what I gained. Me. Not the husband, not the fixer, not the forgiver. Just me. There's this moment in healing when you stop looking backward. Not because it doesn't matter, but because it no longer defines you. I reached that moment 6 months later on a quiet Sunday morning while drinking coffee alone. I looked out the window, saw the light hit the trees just right, and thought, this peace, this is what I fought for. It didn't come from revenge. It didn't come from her apology. It came from choosing myself every day, even when it was hard. And if you've ever been betrayed, if you're still picking up the pieces, know this. You don't have to scream to be strong. You don't have to hate to heal. You just have to keep walking, even if the first steps feel like crawling, even if no one applauds your journey, because the destination isn't her regret. It's your freedom. And one day, you'll wake up and realize you're already there. Asterisk, asterisk, you think betrayal ends with losing a spouse. But nothing compares to realizing the child you thought was yours never was. Asterisk, asterisk. Asterisk, asterisk, I lost my wife, yes. But I also lost the chance to be the father I believed I was. Asterisk, asterisk, the nights of lullabies, the dreams of first steps, of father-son baseball erased in seconds by a paternity result. Asterisk, asterisk, that pain redefined me, but it also rebuilt me. Asterisk, asterisk, they say pain is a great teacher, but betrayal? Betrayal is a brutal professor. Here's what I learned. You can love someone with everything you have and still not be enough for them. That doesn't mean you're unworthy. It means they were incapable of receiving what you gave. One of the hardest truths I had to swallow was this. Loyalty is not a currency that everyone values. I believed that if I stayed, supported, forgave, loved, she'd see the depth of what we had. But some people aren't looking for depth. They're looking for escape, for ego strokes, for novelty. And when your love asks them to be accountable, they flee. I also learned that silence isn't weakness. My decision to wait, to move in shadows, wasn't about cowardice. It was control. It was clarity. And it was protection from further humiliation, from unnecessary chaos, from reacting instead of responding. There's strength in patience. There's power in choosing your moment. And there's unmatched dignity in walking away without burning the house down. More than anything, I learned that peace doesn't come from closure. Closure is a myth and apology, a confession, a last conversation that ties everything up in a bow. Real peace? It comes from acceptance. Acceptance that they'll never understand the damage they caused. Acceptance that justice might never come the way you imagined. Acceptance that your healing isn't dependent on their remorse. That's the real win. I started to redefine my standards. Not for others, but for myself. What kind of man did I want to be? What kind of love would I accept from now on? What boundaries would I never again let anyone cross? The answers surprised me, not because they were new, but because they'd been buried for so long under the rubble of compromise. I learned that love without respect is just manipulation, that apologies without change are just tactics, and that relationships without honesty are just contracts built on sand. I made a list, yes, an actual list of things I'd never tolerate again. Gaslighting, emotional withdrawal, half-truths, blame shifting, avoidance. And then I made a list of things I'd give to someone worthy. Presence, vulnerability, partnership, playfulness, passion. It's not that I became cold. Far from it. I became discerning. And there's a big difference. When I look back now, I don't see a wasted marriage. I see a chapter that taught me how to rewrite my story. Because of her betrayal, I learned how to choose myself. Because of that silence, I learned how to hear my own voice. Because of that ending, I discovered a new beginning. So if you're reading this or listening to this, and you've been through something similar, please know this isn't the end of your worth. It's the beginning of your wisdom. You are not broken. You are becoming. And the person you're becoming, they're going to be powerful, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. They say pain is a great teacher, but betrayal? Betrayal is a brutal professor. Here's what I learned. You can love someone with everything you have and still not be enough for them. That doesn't mean you're unworthy. It means they were incapable of receiving what you gave. One of the hardest truths I had to swallow was this. Loyalty is not a currency that everyone values. I believed that if I stayed, supported, forgave, loved, she'd see the depth of what we had. But some people aren't looking for depth. They're looking for escape, for ego strokes, for novelty. And when your love asks them to be accountable, they flee. I also learned that silence isn't weakness. My decision to wait, to move in shadows, wasn't about cowardice. It was control. It was clarity. And it was protection from further humiliation, from unnecessary chaos, from reacting instead of responding. There's strength in patience. There's power in choosing your moment. And there's unmatched dignity in walking away without burning the house down. More than anything, I learned that peace doesn't come from closure. Closure is a myth and apology, a confession, a last conversation that ties everything up in a bow. Real peace? It comes from acceptance. Acceptance that they'll never understand the damage they caused. Acceptance that justice might never come the way you imagined. Acceptance that your healing isn't dependent on their remorse. That's the real win. I started to redefine my standards. Not for others, but for myself. What kind of man did I want to be? What kind of love would I accept from now on? What boundaries would I never again let anyone cross? The answers surprised me, not because they were new, but because they'd been buried for so long under the rubble of compromise. I learned that love without respect is just manipulation, that apologies without change are just tactics, and that relationships without honesty are just contracts built on sand. I made a list, yes, an actual list of things I'd never tolerate again. Gaslighting, emotional withdrawal, half-truths, blame shifting, avoidance. And then I made a list of things I'd give to someone worthy. Presence, vulnerability, partnership, playfulness, passion. It's not that I became cold. Far from it. I became discerning. And there's a big difference. When I look back now, I don't see a wasted marriage. I see a chapter that taught me how to rewrite my story. Because of her betrayal, I learned how to choose myself. Because of that silence, I learned how to hear my own voice. Because of that ending, I discovered a new beginning. So if you're reading this or listening to this, and you've been through something similar, please know this isn't the end of your worth. It's the beginning of your wisdom. You are not broken. You are becoming. And the person you're becoming, they're going to be powerful, not in spite of the pain, but because of it.